So it's kind of weird, this show. We weren't sure if we were going to get to it because I didn't want to miss out on all the seasons. So we both ended up binging it.
Yeah.
And you binged it faster than I did. You ended up warning me after season 2 that things got a lot darker and that the tone of the show shifted, that it felt a lot more like BoJack Horseman. There were a lot more psychological, emotional struggles for Barry. And I didn't really believe you. I was like, how could they really change the identity of the show? They've always had violence. They've always had Barry doing his introspection.
And it always has somewhat been dark anyways. But
he really loses his sense of like reality in the 3rd season. And it continues into the 4th season. It's like an existential crisis. And then we get time jumps. It's like emotional whiplash, anxiety.
I remember seeing after season 2, there was a video on YouTube that was like why Barry has become the darkest show on television or something like that. And I was like, how can he get that way? And really, once Gene Cousineau figures out who Barry is, the show just veers into a different direction.
Yeah, I guess it really didn't make sense for it to continue along the whole lightheartedness that Gene Cousineau's character provided. Henry Winkler no longer could do that. He was really depressed in those last 2 seasons.
It was kind of hard to watch, actually. I don't know if you got that same feeling.
It felt like, especially this season, the 4th season, like Vince Gilligan, like they had brought him back from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and they said, you're going to direct the 4th season of Barry, because you got the time jumping going on, which we saw with Walter White. You have the surreal suburban house in the middle of the desert, which he had as well in New Mexico. You have the broken characters, the themes of vengeance. It just felt like this show has always been Get Shorty to me, which was that dark comedy. What was the main character of that? Chris O'Dowd? Yeah, so Chris O'Dowd, he was this crime guy, and he tries to reinvent himself by making it big in Hollywood. Barry's whole gist was that he was a hitman who was trying to reform his whole entire life and become a legitimate actor and get a girlfriend and be happy. But by the end of season 1, that goes awry because he kills Henry Winkler's girlfriend, or Cousineau's girlfriend.
And the show never diverts from that plot point.
Right.
And I have to give it credit for that. It's still being brought up in like season 4. In fact, it seems like a lot of things that happened such as in season 1, like with him killing his best friend, that's brought up a ton of times as well.
Yeah,
so
mostly in season 3 though.
I always thought the show just did a good job kind of centering it on things that we had already seen.
Okay, enough recap. Heading into the finale, Sally and Barry's 3-episode-old son, John, who's like 7 years old in real life, are being held hostage by Hank. Hank obviously has turned on Barry since he learned.
About that?
I thought it happened fast because it happened a few episodes earlier when he was in prison, and Fuchs had told Hank that Barry was talking to the FBI and and giving out all the information that about the Chechen mob. And so then they send Fred Armisen after him, and Fred Armisen blows up his own finger. It gets messy.
The show's not unfamiliar with character changes. However, I thought that Hanks was one of the laziest. I was really disappointed what they did with his character, just kind of turning on Barry that fast, when for 3 seasons, they were kind of on the same side.
Yeah, but keep in mind that Hank has never been the brightest tool in the shed. We've seen him be friends with Barry for most of the show, but it did make sense that once he found out he was being sold out and betrayed, and once he had that phone call with Barry where Barry was just lying to his face, but over the phone, then it became pretty clear that he had no love for Barry anymore and that he was going to send his guys after him.
He definitely was not the comic relief by the end of this.
It is funny how Hank wanted to break Barry out of prison originally, and by sending his goons after him to kill him, the podcasters, they ended up helping him gain his freedom because he escaped that way, right? Like that's where we don't see him in that entire episode, and the next thing we know, he's showing up at Sally's place. They go off into the desert and then spend 7 years there.
Yep.
But getting back to the setup right before the finale, Mr. Cousineau has just been accused of being an accomplice and mastermind to the murder of Janice, his girlfriend from season 1, who obviously he never had, like he is the most innocent when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything. So it's really funny that the police are just so off when it comes to that.
Because he didn't bring up one detail. All because he didn't bring up the quarter of $1 million.
That was a big detail. And I could see why the police found that suspicious.
But they drew so many connections just from that. It was ridiculous.
Funny. Yeah, the show retains its comedy, even despite everything else. It's just that it felt unfair to the character. Yeah. So you really felt bad for them. You also have Fuchs, who was Barry's handler for the longest time. He's out of prison. He's running a gang. He wants Barry dead because of just their entire past. Barry has escaped Janice's father's garage. So Janice's father was an ex-cop who had kidnapped him and was really just torturing him until he found out about the $250,000 that Cousineau had. And then I think that it's weird. We'll get into why Barry was able to escape to begin with by the end of this, because that's an ongoing question that I have. But he's off to go save Sally and John because he knows that Hank has them. And then we start this season finale, and Hank is talking to Sally, right?
Yep.
And that's the first time that's ever happened in the entire show.
I like the interaction because both the characters seem broken. Sally has been broken for like 3 seasons, it seems like. I found it funny how, like in season 1, season 2, she was always having to, in the acting classes, do the really dramatic scenes. And by the end of the series,
she was growing as a character in the first 2 seasons. I think by the 3rd season, she hit a wall because of Barry and also because her own career took off to a point where she just couldn't handle some of the pressure. Speaking of which, did it seem like Barry, the character, had aged a full pandemic in this show?
Yes.
That flashback that we see from season 1, he looks so much younger.
Incredibly different.
He looks so aged and weathered. And like, I guess if the stuff that happens to his character actually happened to someone in real life, that's what would happen. It's like when the president ages 50 years when they're in office, you know?
Well, in episode 5, when they kind of focus on Sally and Barry and everything that's happened in the time jump, there's a point where Sally's wig that she's wearing gets taken off and she looks practically the same. Barry does look like just an old man at that point. In fact, I think I had to look up Bill Hader's age afterwards because I was like, he looks like he was
He's 63, right? How old is he?
I think he was like, he's in his 40s,
yeah,
but I
thought
40s. He was in his mid-50s just by the way that they were making him look.
Yeah, well, so Barry knows that Hank is holding Sally and John hostage, so he wants guns. And this is the second time we've seen him go to that like Walmart. The same lady is working there, and he just yells guns. That was one of the funniest moments to me. Then we also see the DA has officially opened the case under the false assumption that Cousineau was in on the murder because Barry gave him the $250,000, and they did that in like a YouTube video that Cousineau's watching, and he's like, I can't believe that like yesterday I was the hero of this story.
Yeah, you're talking about a movie, I think it's his line that he says, but like, I want to go back to the Walmart thing. Yeah. I thought it was a cool one-shot take where he's walking through the Walmart with the guns in his back, but I was like, this is absolutely crazy. That almost broke suspension of disbelief for me, that anyone would be like that crazy to do something like that. This is the same
show that in season 2, its highest rated episode was when he kept on chasing down that karate master guy, and then they had a big fight scene in a supermarket. So I'm not really surprised that they have at a supermarket, he's able to just like go straight down the aisle with a bunch of guns.
Insane though.
Whether or not he would legally be able to do that, I don't know, but who cares? It's funny. So anyways, they're back at NoHo Ball Enterprise, right? And Fuchs shows up, and at first Hank has only taken Sally out. He's left John in the back because he still has enough integrity that he doesn't want to give Barry's son to Fuchs because he thinks that Fuchs is just there to kill everybody, right? And so Fuchs shows up with his gang, and there's words exchanged, and someone calls someone weak and pathetic, and then Hank admits finally to the fact that he was the reason why his love of his life died, Cristobal, while Cristobal's gold statue is behind him. What do you think of that statue?
I thought that the statue was funny when they first introduced it in the first episode, but it was a slight given by Fuchs, because Fuchs is like, I will leave you alone as long as you admit that you were the reason why Cristobal is dead. And
new deal. I won't even ask for Sally and John, right? Is that what was going on? That he would just walk away if Hank admitted to it? And Hank does, but he's like crying by the end there, and then he calls off the deal. Hank's like, he has this moment where he just doesn't want to give Fuchs any like leeway, or he doesn't want to help him at all. And so they start shooting each other. He gets shot first, right?
Yes.
And then he falls back into the statue while this was also hilarious, right? Where that grenade gets thrown.
That was there's 2 parts that I laughed out loud at. That grenade where one of Hank's men is on the ground, but he throws it at like 3 people that are still standing on Fuchs's side, and then it explodes.
And they're in this big glass building, so like the glass breaks, and like it was a really funny scene. However, there's a weird cut where if you watch Hank throughout that entire thing, he goes from being shot to immediately being on the statue, and there was a good 5-foot difference there. So, but they had to do it for the scene, so it looked cool, and you only notice if you replay it a bunch of times like I did. And so, bullets end up in the Cristobal statue as well.
Yeah.
But Hank ends up dying there. And it was an interesting choice because for the longest time, Hank and Cousineau were the show's comic relief. Barry was this like hard character who like kind of almost autistically could not process emotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like they were used to kind of balance him out. And by the end, Hank and Cousineau are just as dark as Barry.
Well, yeah, and also there are similar shots that happen between the 2 of them in this episode. You get the pan out of Hank.
The fade out.
Yeah, the fade out as he's kind of holding on to Cristobal's golden statue's hand. And I was like, wow, that actually works on a really dramatic level.
I thought it worked. I thought it worked, but I also thought it was fast, and I also thought it was sad. Like, it was sad to a point where I was like, did they need to kill this character off and keep Fuchs alive?
That was strange.
Fuchs surviving this whole thing because he Fuchs ends up saving John, who was called out by Hank, and so he was in the middle of that firefight, but Fuchs had jumped on top of him, so John doesn't get hurt. Sally is also alive, but she's off in the corner, and Fuchs says to John, he's like, time to get you back to your daddy. And that was like where I was like, what? This has constantly been his thing, where Fuchs goes from loving Barry to wanting to kill him to going to the places that Barry has killed people's like spouses or their family members and literally telling them who it was so that they could go and kill Barry. Fuchs's character, when he got shot in season 3, I kind of wanted him to die there, just as like a good comeuppance. But instead, he's the one who like walks away from this.
They were trying to, I think, tie it into season 1, where Fuchs was Barry's manager and always on the lookout for him. But I agree, the character change I thought didn't really work.
It wasn't that
well.
He changed for 3 seasons. He was the guy who was stirring shit up. Had he not existed, Kusino would have never figured out about Janice, and Barry would have been fine. Everything would have been golden, and yet Barry keeps on forgiving Fuchs, and Fuchs keeps on like stirring shit up and then turning around and doing something nice for Barry.
Well, there's a couple things. Yeah. One is that I think that they were trying to foreshadow it, especially in jail when Barry and Fuchs were talking, trying to show that Fuchs kind of, because they like apologized to each other, right? And they were trying to, I think, show that they were kind of trustworthy there. But also, it goes with the tone of this series finale. There's other things that happen in this show where it seems like the people that should get their comeuppance don't in the end. And I think that is just kind of an instance of
really,
this.
It's only Fuchs to me. That's the only person who doesn't get their ending justice. It seems as if after season 2, that's when Barry freaked out and he went after Fuchs, right? He started shooting up everywhere. And then by season 3, Fuchs was in hiding and he was living on that goat farm and he seemed happy. But it only took a phone call from Barry where he found out Barry didn't care about him anymore, where he got mad at Barry and then he decided to go to every single person and start to cause an issue and try to get them to kill Barry. It was just an odd character arc for this guy, and he ends up surviving, and I don't know how I feel about that. But then he gives John back to Barry. Barry walks away with John, and Sally's suddenly there. Like, you don't see her follow them, but she's suddenly with them. I assume they made a phone call and she just like caught up with them at that motel. Yeah. But she tries to convince Barry to turn himself in as they're going to sleep and help Kusino redeem himself, because Kusino obviously is close to going to jail, right? And probably really depressed about it.
But Barry doesn't want to. He says that
Barry's been listening to Bill Burr. You recognize Bill Burr's voice,
obviously,
and so he's convinced himself, because he's really into the religious aspect of like redemption, and even if you murder someone, you're going to be okay.
Something that happened after the time jump, yes.
So he resists that idea.
God doesn't want him to, is his reasoning.
Yeah, I like Bill Burr being a hockey player who had murdered someone and then like gone to jail and then started a podcast and then become extremely successful from it, and it was still arguing whether or not it was justified. So the next day though, Barry wakes up and Sally is gone, John is gone, and Sally is left the same way she left her first abusive boyfriend, where she leaves in the night and doesn't even confront him. So again, another parallelism from that. And Barry goes directly to Kusino's place thinking that's where Sully went, right?
Exactly, because it seemed like that was what was happening, I think, the episode prior, where Sally was calling Kusino, being like, hey, can you like come pick us up from the airport?
Well, she also told Barry, she was like, I was going to Kusino's place. Yeah. That's where I was going to meet you. So that's why he thinks that she's there. He follows her, but Tom is already at Kusino's place. That's the agent of Kusino who drove into the car when Kusino told him about talking to the reporter.
This was intense. I mean, this was the climax of the show.
Yeah, but we didn't know that at the time. But you recognized Fred Malamed from WandaVision?
He's from everything. Yeah, I mean, even Silicon Valley, I think, as well.
No, that's the wrong guy.
That's the wrong guy.
Yes. Okay, so this is the guy from WandaVision who was in the first episode, the boss character.
Yeah.
Okay, so he goes to Kusino's place, yeah?
Yes.
And Kusino is looking at Rip Torn's gun, the same gun that Barry was arrested with, the same gun that he tried to kill Barry with earlier in the season.
They were trying to set it up as if he was going to commit suicide with this gun. At least that's what I got from it.
Yeah, so he's in there staring at the gun, and Barry shows up, and so Tom and Barry are having a discussion outside, and Tom says to Barry, hey, you should turn yourself in. And Barry finally is like, okay, and that's where Kusino shoots him, right?
Yes. Now, can I just say the wow delivered by Bill Hader once he falls into the chair and sees who shot him by Gene Kusino?
It wasn't just a wow. That's what confused me. This title of the episode is called Wow, but like, what was it actually?
It was Oh Wow.
Yeah, it was Oh Wow. But like, why wasn't it out Oh Wow for the title?
I don't know, but I do want to kind of analyze the Oh Wow, because as we've stated already, Barry turns into a different series after season 2. The tone gets all dark, but the way that Bill Hader delivered that line, and maybe I'm analyzing this too much, it almost felt like he that character, after he said that line, was reverting back to the first 2 seasons where it was a lot more lighthearted, because I thought it was so perfect and so funny the way that Bill Hader delivered that line right before he gets his ending shot in the head, that I almost felt like it was resetting his character to what we've seen him to in season 1.
Interesting. Yeah, so like he gets shot once in the chest. That's where he's like, oh wow. I took it just as he looked at Kusno. He's like, really, this is the way I'm going to go out? Like,
well, obviously, I mean, that's...
like, is this really it for me? And he would not have expected this based on everything that he survived.
But he wasn't even mad about it. It was just like genuine surprise. Like, oh, okay, this is about to happen. There's something I can do about it.
And then he gets shot in the head, and it's 25 minutes into the episode, and you're thinking, wow, they just killed off Barry, and there's still like 10 minutes left.
There's still 10 minutes left, but that's also where you get the pan out from Kusno, just like you did the pan out from
before it does the pan out, it goes immediately to black, making you think, is this going to end like The Sopranos? Is this going to be one of those shows where we're just left and then the last 10 minutes are used with the cast clapping themselves on the back and talking about how great the finale was? No, but then they go back to it to confirm that Barry is dead.
Yes.
So that's what I was happy about. And then they do the fade away.
But both are, but I wanted to say that Hank and Kusno, they're both in the middle of the screen when both fade outs happen. And that's why I was thinking you were getting kind of, I don't know, some type of connection between the two of them after Kusno shoots Barry.
Well, you just did kill off 2 of the main characters, if not the 2 biggest characters in the show. Because even when Barry's storyline wasn't like central to the plot, Hank's was.
Yes.
So he really had become the secondary main character of the show.
That's true. I also want to say, finally, I was able to see a show where they killed off the main character and I didn't get it ruined for me. I won't say what other shows that's happened to in case anyone's watching it. And I won't say any others. But anyone that you can think of is probably the case. I've always gotten it ruined for me. This one was like one of the very few ones where I was like, oh, okay, I actually know what that feels like now.
This is how I thought they were going to end Dexter. Not that he would die, basically. Mm-hmm. And so I was surprised when they didn't. But did you watch the ending scene where he came back as a lumberjack?
You're talking about
in this, yeah. So it goes into applause, fades out into applause, and then suddenly again you're left wondering whether or not this was a play, about a show, about a real thing that happened, and it's starting getting a little messy. But then you realize there's another time jump that just happened. We're set in the future. Sally is now a high school teacher. It seems like she's gotten over a little bit of her what would you call it? Her depression.
She didn't even look any older though. It's like throughout all the time.
They put glasses on her and stuff and they tried to make it
that
she was
only
a little older.
Thing.
Well, the thing is that when she had the wig, right? Mm-hmm. When Hank took off her wig, that's when she was finally honest with John about who his dad was.
Right.
So I did find that a little compelling how they were like, well, now that she's out of the mask, now that she's she can be clear of her, she can clear her conscience basically with the kid. And that kind of comes into play here. So she's teaching this high school play, right? And it's getting applause, and the AP teachers are hitting on her. And now John, who is now a high schooler himself, he's played by the kid from It. He goes to his friend's house. He asks if he can go to his friend's house to just hang out, and he's secretly there to watch a movie based on his dad's life.
Called The Mask Collector.
Mm-hmm. And does that mean anything to you? I know there's a movie franchise out there called The Collector. It doesn't really have anything to do with this, but
that's what it like reminded me of when I saw the title.
Well, that's just a horror film, yeah. But that's like a horror series. So yeah, John watches the Hollywood version of his dad. And there's a lot of lens flare. It stars Jim Cummings as Barry, right?
Yeah.
You see that he's presented as a victim, and Kusino is the villain of the series. I love the scene where he walks in after being accepted by Kusino and having this heartwarming thing with him. And Kusino's like, "We're busy, Barry."
Yeah, there's other people in the room.
And you see like a fake Hank. Did you see the
I didn't see.
He's on the right side, and then Kusino later on, where Barry finds that he's killed Janice. it wasn't even Barry who killed Janice in this world. Kusuno did, and then he has to kill Barry, right?
The movie's so over dramatic. He shoots Barry like six different times.
No, he has a 6-shooter, and he shoots him 9 times. There's never-ending bullets in movies. You also have that Kusuno gets life in prison. That's one of the last shots that you get where it says he's now serving life in prison, which is funny because had Barry just turned himself in, he would have obviously left him free.
Yeah.
And then Fuchs is non-existent in the storyline, and Sally's Macbeth speech goes to Barry in it. So again,
I got that.
People compared it to American Sniper, because apparently the guy from American Sniper is not that, like, he's not a hero.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I saw American Sniper.
And the way that Clint Eastwood made him seem was, like, way more heroic than he should have been. I don't know.
And then the last shot is John kind of smiles at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I guess because he likes that his legacy, or that his dad's legacy, was looked at in a fond way, because he loved his father.
Yeah, but he didn't know everything.
No, he did. He knew that the way that he was saved was not the way that was depicted in the movie. He knows what his mom has told him. I think he knows the truth, but at the same time, he's happy the world doesn't. Whether or not Kusuno should be in jail feels a little wrong.
No, that's the thing. So both these series, Succession and Barry, end on somewhat like evil notes almost, or very sad notes, because I don't think that they wanted Kusuno. You're not supposed to be happy that he went to jail,
or that Fuchs is just alive and running around.
Yeah,
out there.
And there's no karma that comes to him either. That being said, I really enjoyed the finale. So seasons 1 and 2 I thought were great. Seasons 3 I thought it wasn't as good as the first 2 seasons, but season 4 I felt was a mixed bag, and it really depended on if this finale was going to be good enough. And
so
I think it was.
Episode?
I would give it a 9 out of 10, and I'm going to miss this show ... somewhat.
Okay. I mean, I would say the weird factor is 9. Creativity, 9. Implementation, 8. Resolution for me, 5. Pacing, also 5, because they just sped things up so much. So overall, I give it a 7. Now that doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it. I did. It's
well,
like
when
a 5 is just average.
Well, let me ask you about the resolution 5 out of 10. What about the resolution did you not like?
The stuff we just went over.
But you're supposed to not like that. That's why the show decided to go about it that way.
I think the resolution and the pacing are connected. So it's like the way that they develop these things to happen at the very ending, that Fuchs turn to being like, I'm just going to give John back. Like the whole point of him trying to get Hank to kidnap them was so that he could hurt them. But then he was just going to hand them right back at the end. It didn't seem like that actually achieved much.
I did have that down listed as a con, kind of Fuchs's turn at the very end of it. I understood why they went about it that way, again, to parallel season 1, but I didn't think it worked.
I also feel like the show kind of fell in love with itself a little bit after season 2. They were like, we're not going to make this, we don't want to follow in the same camp as you, where the main character, who is a monster, is somehow depicted as a good guy. Like, people start falling in love with him. So, like, with Barry, they sort of... one thing I did notice, though, is that Barry in the future timeline, he never killed anyone. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So, like, maybe he did have a little bit of a redemption there, but mostly we see him as sort of an abuser in a way, just a different type, and he's not a good guy. Like,
overindulgence, sure, I can see that of itself.
Bill Hader loves these type of like true crime stuff, or he loves true crime just in general. So it makes sense that they would want to go for the super dark ending. And that's what they did.
I did want to bring up that not a lot of shows have it where the secret is out and they're still able to last a full season. Like, the secret is completely out about Barry. Yeah. Everyone knows what he's done. Everyone knows that he's not a bad guy, or that he is a bad guy.
That's why I give creativity a 10 or a 9, because like it's the giving up the secret and then having to live in that world. Usually that's when a show like ditches it. It's like, let's get out of here because we can't survive in this premise.
There's like 2 episodes
left. He's no longer
usually
going to be booking gigs as an actor, right?
Yeah.
But somehow they were able to keep a full season of that, but they did have to rely on those time jumps, which it almost felt like a separate season. It felt like season 4, part 1, part 2 was when he escaped. It's interesting how the highest IMDb rating, so this one, you're more related to it than I am, because you gave it a 9. It has a 9.1, I think. The only higher rated episode from the season is the one that Barry doesn't actually show up in. It's the one where he's escaped and we see the rest of everybody's lives play out.
He shows up at the very end, but yeah, I understand what you mean. I think that was my second favorite of the season.
But because he's barely in this episode,
and
he's barely in that episode, the show is called Barry, but really Bill Hader was not in as much of the seasons as he was in season 1. Like, I think every season it got less and less that he was in it.
I think my favorite episode by far, and I think it might be one of my favorite episodes of all time, is season 2, episode 5, the one that we brought up earlier with the like the person
that was like a
that has to
9.8.
go. Yeah, that's my favorite episode. The show went crazy, but like I said, 9 out of 10 for me for this finale. I enjoyed it.
There's a few themes I wanted to address. First of all, everyone is very petty in this show. You've got Kusino,
incredibly.
Sally, Fuchs, Hank, Barry even. Lots of people didn't have to die that ended up dying, but just based off pettiness. Again, with Kusino's decision to kill Barry as opposed to letting him go and show himself. But I don't know if Kusino knew that he was about to. He might have just been upset because of everything that had happened in his life at that point.
I think that was it. I think he was just upset.
I think it's left to interpretation. The other thing is that I liked how they did do the reference to Lincoln and Gandhi and how Barry had become sort of obsessed with this idea of like good people could actually have different sides of them that were not promoted as much in history. And that's how Barry sort of is ending up being looked at. Right?
Yeah. No, I didn't even get that connection, but yeah, that is true.
Yeah, and so and then also the Fred Armisen showing up from Documentary Now and Bill Hader and them working together in that, and how that kind of Hollywood critique kind of plays a role in this as well, because this whole thing is about making fun of Hollywood.
Yeah.
There were a lot of iPhones and Apple earbuds in this season for it not to have been produced by Apple.
Why wasn't this last season on Apple TV?
And then the thing I brought up earlier with Janice's dad, that guy was so on top of it. He caused the Hollywood Reporter guy to like go insane and start speaking German. Like he's the one who got Kusino to admit to everything. That guy, he also drove Fuchs directly to the police precinct and caught Barry.
That's
super smart dude. I think he let Barry go. Like there's
no
no way that he thought that Barry would be stuck in that garage for a full day. Barry got out and he fainted in the kitchen and the guy didn't come home. Meaning he was either so absorbed in what was going on with Kusino, which I just think that this guy was too smart for that. I think he was like, well, Barry was a victim, and he believed that. And so he gave him the opportunity to escape.
That would be like
Barry
a Sixth Sense thing, though. That would be like a...
Well, he was wrong to do so, is the thing. It's like, it wasn't Barry who was just working under... it wasn't Kusino who was the evil villain. So he made a mistake if that's the case, but I still found it interesting that the guy who was shown as sort of a superpowered dude ended up letting Barry go. People pointed out that the theme song never returned in the 4th season, and they were sad about that.
I knew it didn't return for the series finale, but I didn't get that it was never in the last season.
I don't know. I'll have to go back and check. But then also Game of Thrones, Westworld, those finales didn't work out for HBO, but it does seem like with Succession and now Barry, two wins, I would say, on the finale.
Was this aired
also
back to back? It seems like it almost would be.
Yes, on Sunday. They were both aired on Sunday. So it just seems like they're going in the right direction, and it bodes well for The Last of Us whenever that ends. But other than that, 7 from me, 9 from you. We both liked it. I compared it to a lot of other shows: Get Shorty, BoJack Horseman, Better Call Saul, and Mr. In Between. What's the Search Party? The one that kind of changes tones on you in a similar way. But But
BoJack Horseman for tone, Dexter for series. That's kind of the two that I have. So.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.